Welcome to the Recovery Toolkit Podcast. I'm Richie. I'm going to be your host. Throughout the series, we're going to talk to a range of different people who will give you tools and tips to help manage your recovery. The podcast itself is being brought to you by Epic Restart Foundation, who are a national charity who support people to rebuild a positive life after gambling harm. So welcome to the Recovery Toolkit Podcast. Today I'm joined by Cheryl. Cheryl, tell us a little bit about who you are and why you might have been invited onto the podcast.
Okay, so my name is Cheryl. I work for a charity called Adveriad, and currently I'm their head of service for gambling. And we've, over the last 4 years, have a residential pathway for people experiencing comorbidities, complexities alongside gambling harms.
Love it. We do a lot of work together, and what I love about it is there's a pathway. That's the joyful thing, is there's lots of different pathways people can take, but when they come into Adveriad or Parkland Place, then that's the thing that works for them generally, or sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. That's the reality of it, isn't it? Why is it important we have a pathway like what you provide, do you think? Before you do that, you mentioned comorbidities and complexities. What does that mean?
Okay, so comorbidities, they could have an additional addiction. We see a lot of people with alcohol addiction, cocaine addiction, alongside gambling harms. And then the complexity could be an enduring mental health. Now, as we know, people that have had gambling harms are, extremely more likely to have suicidal ideation or attempts on their life. So we're looking at enduring mental health as well. That could be emotionally unstable personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, autism, ADHD, depression, anxiety, but treatment resistant as well. So we see quite a lot of people with enduring mental health.
Treatment resistant? What does that mean?
So there could be people that, that treatment they think doesn't work for them. So it can be treatment resistant depression. But is it because they haven't found the right pathway for them?
Yeah. So as in they're not believing before they even get there that's going to work?
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
It's difficult to navigate, isn't it? But with the pathway that we've got, it just enables people to come out of their life, so to speak. They've got a lot of chaos going on. So it enables them to see the wood from the trees, is how I like to say it. You've got all this chaos going on in your life, but actually if we just remove you from that and put you inside like a little bubble, so we can have a look at actually what's going on for you in your life, because it might not necessarily be the gambling, might be the final part. We actually have to strip them back to look at what's been going on for them beforehand.
Yeah. So talk us through. So I've got a gambling addiction, and alcohol, drug abuse is also part of my story. Mm-hmm. So if I picked up the phone and said, help, what would that look like for me? Talk us through what would go on.
Okay. So initially we would start with an assessment and we would cover all bases on the assessment, what your drug use has been, what your alcohol intake is, and then also the gambling. We will also conduct the PGSI just to have a good baseline. And usually with people coming through our service, we are looking at a PGSI score of 24 to 27. Alongside then, we look at your alcohol use, drug use. And then what we do is we put you on pre-treatment. So while we're gathering doctors' reports, if you've been involved with mental health services, we gather them. If you're part of the probation service, we gather the probation reports. But you're not just left while we're doing this. It's not all of a sudden, oh, hi, Richie, we've done your assessment. I'm sorry, we can't do anything until we've done all of this. We put you on pre-treatment. And that's with one of our counsellors who then just talks through, phones you every week for an hour or up to an hour, but to explore, has usage gone up? Because for us, if you've started, let's say, 4 cans of beer, 6 cans of beer a night, but then all of a sudden you're switching to spirits, then we need to be looking at bringing you in a little bit quicker, so we rag rate people. But then you do your pre-treatment while we're waiting for all your reports, but equally as well, we're waiting for a bed to come available. And once the bed's in, we've got dates, you come in for your residential stay, and then you have 6 weeks of aftercare on leaving.
Okay. What if I'm alcohol dependent, and would I go straight into that sort of environment, or is the detox and stuff as well?
There's a detox, yeah. So once we've done the assessment, they sent off to our clinicians, so that would be our psychiatrist in our Wrexham unit. who would look at it, and just then they decide then what your detox would look like, and we come back to you and say, you're looking at 7 nights, 14 nights, but it just is dependent on what the substance is. If it's alcohol, it's usually 7 to 14. If it's ketamine, it's just an observation usually. Cocaine, the same, but again, it's dependent on usage. But if it's something like benzodiazepine or an opiate-based, you could be looking at 28 days.
Right. So you've mentioned quite a few different types of drugs there. Mm-hmm. What's this kind of, with gambling, what do you see the most association? Where's the biggest links, do you think?
At the moment, we're seeing more between alcohol and cocaine. We are seeing a slight increase as well of ketamine use coming through. But primarily over the last 4 years, it's been alcohol and cocaine the most.
Yeah. Do you think there's any reason that them kind of three things go hand in hand?
Well, I do think so. I suppose it's a cycle, and I was thinking about this, and I do often think about it. So alcohol, as you know, lowers your inhibitions. So therefore then, lower inhibitions, more risk. But equally, we have the flip side that you've gambled everything that you've got nothing left. So therefore you then go to reach alcohol just to take it away. Mm-hmm. So it's like a perpetuating cycle.
Yeah, and a lot of people I talk to, they'll say the alcohol, the drugs, they're the pain relief. Mm-hmm. Gambling becomes the pain relief as well for some people, isn't it? And generally what we're doing as human beings is moving away from pain or towards pleasure. And you get that two-pronged attack with all of these substances, really, don't you?
Yeah.
They make you avoid the reality of life and help you get through that moment.
And I think that's the fundamental thing, isn't it? The crux of when you're sitting down with somebody, equally, if we were looking at your assessment, some of the questions that get asked and when you're in treatment is, what is it that you're avoiding in life? Because if we don't fundamentally get to that underlying issue, and you have maybe but I shouldn't say it like that, but if you've come in with alcohol and gambling, cocaine and gambling, you might get them two things under control, go out and pick something else up.
Yeah. How common is that?
Well, when we try and address it, it has happened. There's no point in, shying away from that. And I remember having a conversation with somebody that had come through, and they were sitting down in the library in Parkland. And I said, if we don't deal with the reasons what brought you into treatment, you may as well pack your bags, go away and think about it, because you will just continue to move from one addiction to the other, and thankfully they are doing extremely well now, because it's about, you have to look at what the pain is inside, don't you?
Yeah, 100%. I think I went into rehab because of gambling. That was the only thing. I was using drugs daily. I was using alcohol daily, but I went into rehab for gambling. I didn't think, because I was functioning, because I was going to work every day, I didn't think that drink and drugs were a problem. But actually it was just all this intertwined relationship with avoidance.
Yeah. And it's interesting because we do get some people that come through that gambling they feel is their primary issue, simply because of the losses that they've had with it. And it's almost, well, I do drink, but I can get that under control. And actually it's like, you've got to look at this as a whole. If you've come in with one, look at it as a whole, because the avoidance thing will still catch up with you. We've also had people that then just swap to what you would consider harmless activities.
Me.
Harmless.
Yeah.
Do you know what? I'll go and, I'll go and pick up the dartboard or the snooker board or the golfing, but then all of a sudden they want to be the best at that, and it's like, but you're still avoiding something in your life.
Yeah, totally. And I sit here smiling. I talk about it all the time. Golf was a massive avoidance tool for me. Got all right at it, but wanted to get better. And whilst I was trying to get better at golf, I was avoiding everything else. And then it was, I'll not play my council tax this week so I can buy a new golf club, and all old behaviour. And I see all the time people, you can have a good relationship with anything, but you can also have a bad relationship with anything. And that's what we need to look at, isn't it? It's not sometimes the substance, the drug, the activity, the sport or whatever it is. It's the behaviour with it.
Absolutely. And this is something that I was saying just recently in the rehab. We can take away the substance. We can take away the gambling. But we also have to look at the behaviour behind it. And sometimes we find ourselves that we're dealing with clients that are still an addict, if you like, because the behaviour is still there. I don't like to use the phrase, it's almost like you've got dry drunks in the room, you know, so we've removed the substance, but actually take a really long, hard look at your behaviour. And there needs to be an element of behaviour change and an element of personal responsibility in recovery.
I love that. Biggest thing in recovery for me is personal responsibility. And I think so many people want to avoid it. Like, that's the reality, especially in them early days. We're all looking for the reason outside of ourselves for why we are in the position we're in. But the reality is, it's an inside job, isn't it?
Yeah, and sometimes it's easier to try and lay blame on someone else's doorstep, if you like. And we do have a question in our care plan, you know, who do you blame for your addiction? You know, do you take some blame, no blame, you know? And then we kind of like look at that and go, okay, because let's not move away from the fact that people come in and there's been significant trauma in their lives, you know. So there has to be like some element of, well, that happened to me, therefore I need to work through that. But I still think in the back, you have to have that personal responsibility to be able to get through, because if you always look for someone else to blame, there will always be a chance that you'll pick something else up.
Yeah, you said something there that, like, I got goosebumps when you said it. And you said, if I always look for why it happened to me. And when I was working with a coach, I was like, oh, but this happened to us, this happened to us, this happened to us. She's like, no, it didn't happen to you. It happened for you. Like, what did that bring you? And I was like, this is going deep here. But all of the things that I found, where I got to anyway, was I just done what I needed to do to survive. That's what I was doing. And I didn't know any other way. But then once I started to understand and learn and do some work, I found another way. And my self-awareness went up, and I became a better version of me because I knew how to deal with triggers, how to deal with emotions, how to deal with all them things that I'd been avoiding. But all of them things served us, you know, and they happened to us and for us. So when I flipped that, it was like, well, actually, if all them things happen for us, what am I going to do now? And now it's on me to go and take a better path or a different choice or a different direction. And I think that's so important in recovery, because if people aren't taking that personal responsibility, you're going to struggle. That's the reality, isn't it?
Absolutely. And you know, we keep saying this around, you know, where is your personal responsibility? We can't keep. And it is, some of the stories that we do here are incredibly sad, really incredibly sad. But as a person, do you want that to define the rest of your life, or do you want it to be a stepping stone to something better?
Yeah, totally. I mean, had I not went through everything I got through, I wouldn't be sat here today doing this.
Yeah.
You know, I get to do a podcast. Like, how cool is that? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, just crazy things that have now happened in my life, my job, my, you know, where I live, the relationship with my kids, all of that stuff's come because I went through all that struggle.
Yeah, and I mean, for myself, you know, I had something personal happen to me when I was back in my 20s. I don't often speak about it, and I don't let it define me, but every now and again it will come up for certain, you know, situations, and I have to work through, because if you allow it to hook back in, then you think, oh, I could be hitting the self-destruct button here. But, you know, you build up some resilience, don't you? You kind of like, you know, my challenges over the last 7 years in the job that I've had, you know, I started off as a little support worker in a little project, you know, 2.5 days a week. Then the rehab opened, went for a job there, you know, climbed myself up. But there has been setbacks, you know, and sometimes that hooks back into what I've been through previously. And I have to kind of like keep saying to myself, no, you've got this, you can do this. Do you know what I mean? So, and it's helping people build that resilience. And sometimes it does break you, but you have to pick yourself up, don't you?
Yeah, 100%. Resilience. Tell us what your version of resilience is. Tell us what you mean by resilience.
Well, it's just learning. I suppose for me, it's you go through something, don't you? And you learn how to pack your armour, is how I look at it, and not you don't have to have a broad, thick skin or a broad back, but you have to learn to think, right, okay, I have got through some difficult times, and therefore if they present themselves again, I can do it again. And not allow it to kind of like go, you know, I was going to swear then, but not get to a moment where it's like, right, I've got all of this stuff going on. I don't like what's going on. It's taking me back to something, and therefore you go and manage it the old way you've managed it, be that through drugs, drink or gambling.
And we've got these pathways, haven't we? We've got pathways that are primed to do that. And that's the challenge, isn't it? It's how do we move away from these really primed pathways that are kind of on autopilot sometimes to then creating new pathways and finding new ways to cope. And I always talk about doing the work with people. And that's what we really need to do, isn't it? It's that constant reminder that actually this is deep-rooted. This might resurface. This might show its face again. But actually, how can I deal with it?
Yeah, and so if you're looking at core beliefs, one of the things we look at in the rehab is we start off with your core beliefs. What are your core beliefs and where do you think they've come from? You know, and we can give a list, but that doesn't mean to say that they're all yours. I'm not. And usually, you know, you're finding people, I'm not enough. When you look at where that's come from, some of it is from early childhood, not done well at school, or, you know, just for example. But then there could be others that we've not necessarily thought about. But that when you look at somebody's core belief, then we can work on that to kind of like reprime the pathways, isn't it? And even if it's something as simple as looking in the mirror every day and saying, I am enough, because you start to think your own thoughts, don't you, if you're left alone with them long enough, especially if you've had a really, really bad day.
Yeah, definitely. I think when we're in that negative space or in active addiction, that's all we want to focus on, isn't it? The negative, the struggle, the pain. Where what I found when I got into recovery was when I started looking for the positive stuff, I started to find it. And we get what we look for in life, don't we?
Absolutely. And I mean, I always remember when we first started training in the rehab, kind of like for it first opened, and we all had to do one negative thing about ourselves and one positive thing. And I can guarantee everybody in the room of the staff team started with the negative thing first. Because that's easy to do, isn't it? That we don't like talking very positively about ourselves. And I think sometimes if we were in our own heads and we actually spoke out loud what we were thinking half the time, we'd never speak to people in that way. You know, it's crazy how the mind can work.
And that's the internal battle, isn't it?
Yep.
We talk to ourselves more than talk to anyone. Just a shame most of the time from a lot of people, it's not in a very good way, isn't it?
What we think we become sometimes.
Yeah. When you say that, what we think we become, how hard is it to change that?
Depends on how deep rooted but also it's down to the person, I think, you know, because we can give people the tools and we can sit there and work through their core beliefs with them. We can go through low self-esteem, you know, because people coming in, if you can think about, you know, the people coming into the rehab and the stories that they've got, you know, they are an absolute, you know, I'm not going to say rock bottom because sometimes they're not, but they're very, very close. So you've just got to build that person back up, haven't you? You know, by starting slowly with the self-esteem, you know. So they start. The thing is, if you love yourself, then it's easier to love others. But that could be a hard, painful process. Yeah,
100%. I love inner child work. Like, I think that's where a lot of problems stem from in people is unmet needs as a child. And that doesn't mean you had a bad upbringing. That doesn't mean that your parents didn't do a good job. That doesn't mean that, you know, you were riddled with trauma. It just means that as a child, something just wasn't quite right. You know, like, I don't know, you didn't get a cuddle from your parent when you needed one. But that isn't because they're a bad parent. That's just because they had a busy life. Or, you know, like, they didn't give you a bedtime story. Like, it's them simple things sometimes that is the missing link. And when children make life about them, don't they? So when that something doesn't happen, it catastrophizes with inside a child. And then it becomes low self-esteem, lack of confidence. I'm not enough. I'm not worthy. I'm unlovable. Like, how a tiny little act in a child can then manifest into something huge.
And it's like an inner critic then, isn't it? So, you know, you've got this critical voice come in, and it could be something as simple as you've been okay all the way through school. They separate you in school to another class or something like that. The teacher says a throwaway comment. And it's
you hang your hat on it forever.
Yeah, forever, you know. And then that becomes the inner critic, you know, and then you fail something else and it's, I always knew I wasn't good enough simply because of something's just said, like in the spur of the moment. But it can have a profound effect.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of that. And I'm not going to say everyone, because I think there's some other contributing factors that can cause addiction. But a lot of the people that I work with, I generally can have a conversation and ask about 5 questions with them, and they're going, oh, light bulb moment, just by asking some questions, and they have them, big breakthroughs, I want to call them. But not everyone. What other things, Cheryl, can contribute, do you think, to somebody becoming addicted to something?
Well, you've got the nature-nurture argument, haven't you? I would just say an argument per se, and the predisposition of people, if that's all you've known while you've been brought up, then there is the chance that then you will then go ahead and continue on the same continuum as a family, isn't it? Because that's all you've ever known.
And do you think that's hereditary, or do you think that's more learned behaviour?
Oh, that's a hard one, Rich. I would normally go with learned behaviour, but there are arguments to say that people can have the hereditary, predisposition to it. But I just think a lot of it could be learned behaviour, couldn't it? This is how I've been brought up, therefore it becomes the norm.
Yeah, totally. What you see, what you model.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think some people hang the hat on there, it's hereditary, and that's if that works for them, if it helps them get into recovery, if it helps them, face themselves in the mirror, then so be it. But I don't think, what I want to say is don't allow that to maintain the victimhood within you.
Because the other side of it is we often get, I've got an addictive personality.
Yeah.
So again, there's papers for, there's papers against this kind of description. But I will always take it back to, well, what void are you filling? What are you running away from? Because as we've already mentioned, it doesn't necessarily have to be something harmful. It can be something as a hobby. But again, you've played golf until you've got scratch. That means you can't be any better at it.
You can always be better at golf, Cheryl.
But then what do you go on to? Do you know what I mean? So I just think it's actually, when people say about the addictive personality, I just give them papers to read on it. We don't say one way or the other. We just say, but what are you running and avoiding from?
People say to me all the time, God, you've got a really addictive personality, haven't you? And I'm like, no, I'm obsessive, I'm compulsive. I've got all them traits. Like you can put a label on us if you want. You can probably guess what label most people put on us, but you can put a label on us if you want. But actually the reality is I've done them things because I'm probably in a little bit of pain still somewhere.
Yeah.
That's the reality.
And we don't like looking at ourselves, and we certainly don't want to look at, what's caused us this. Yeah. Sometimes it's easier to just, I've got through life, you look at people at the moment, 30s and 40s coming through the rehab, they've got to 30 and 40 years of age avoiding. So therefore, why do I need to do it now? Well, it's becoming destructive now. Yeah. And if, do you want to continue the trajectory of your life for the next 20 years, still avoiding,
Yeah, and there's a 12-step recovery was massive for me in the early days, Cheryl, and there's a line in one of the scripts that says life becoming manageable. And that's the bit for me. I can attach that to anything. Life becoming manageable because I played too much golf. Life becoming manageable because I drank too much alcohol. Life becoming manageable because I couldn't manage the gambling. Life becoming, if life is becoming unmanageable for whatever reason, shopping, eating, all of these things are things that can cause your life to become unmanageable, then you really need to have a look and potentially do some work.
100%.
Yeah. 100%. Drugs and alcohol, you mentioned your rehab pathway will support people with drugs and alcohol. And you've only been around 4 years, 7 years in the gambling space?
4 years in the gambling space. The rehab's been open 7.
So 4 years in the gambling space. How long has Veriad been around in the drug and alcohol space? So
at Veriad itself were 3 charities that merged together back in 2020, but the underpinning organisations, KAIS and Haval, have been around between 40 and 50 years respectively, each organisation.
What have we learnt then? 40 to 50 years in the drug and alcohol space and 4-ish years in the gambling space. I bet you're seeing loads of catastrophes in the gambling space that you've already seen in the drug and alcohol space, Cheryl.
Well, I think the biggest thing that we're going towards now is obviously commissioning tendering, with the new statutory levy. And a few years, about 10 or 15 years ago, drug and alcohol went through the same kind of process. And it became a competitive tent, as you can imagine. Yeah. I need your clients. But actually, there's enough clients, I think, for everybody. Because what happened is they started doing tendering processes and undercutting, but then eventually you go out of business anyway, So there's not very many rehabs around at the moment. Very, very few detox centres. So it's just about learning what they went through and having open and collaborative talks with people, because I still believe, whilst we're relatively new in the space, our clients are the ones that have got multiple challenges, but there are other clients. There's plenty of services and plenty of clients that need help without us all kind of going against one another.
Totally.
For want of a better phrase.
Collaboration.
Absolutely.
Collaboration, great word, that, isn't it? How many times have you heard that word in the last 4 years since you come into this space, Cheryl?
Well, we started off with the pathway, collaborating, because we've always been very honest. At Veriad are known for drug and alcohol and mental health. We didn't know very much about, gambling. And we don't want to be in the addiction is addiction.
Yeah.
Because there are differences with gambling. We wouldn't necessarily say to somebody with an alcohol problem or substance use problem, you need to go and give your finances over to someone else. You need to do this, that, and the other. You need to exclude yourself. But, you have to take them things into consideration when you're dealing with somebody with a gambling problem. So we pathwayed with Gordon Moody initially because we had the expertise in the drug and alcohol field and they had the expertise in the gambling field. And as I've kind of over the last 4 years and self-taught, I suppose, and been around people like yourself, I've tried to kind of upskill my knowledge, but I've never proclaimed to be the expert. I've always gone to people that I consider to be the experts in the field.
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? One of my favourite sayings is, if everyone stayed in the lane, the people that need the support will get better support.
Yeah. Yeah, and there should be no wrong door, should there? There should be no wrong door. If there are people that are sitting, and I say this all the time, if there are people sitting on books out there that have got a drug and alcohol problem or a substance use problem, then what the beauty of the pathway now that we've got is sometimes we are just detoxing people and we are then sending them back out into a step-down care model, because they don't want a long residential stay. So if we can help in that way, we've got kind of a little bit more fluidity. The pilot we were part of ended this March, and we've seen, it's been independently reviewed. There is a need for it because there are these people that are presenting every day needing this pathway. Yeah,
and it's a crazy world we're in at the minute, isn't it? That's the reality. It's chaos. And nobody quite knows yet. Lots of uncertainty. Why do you think there's a real need for residential care?
As I've previously mentioned, and, it's not in the NICE guidelines, sometimes that person needs to be taken out of the environment that they're in to be able to focus on kind of away from the chaos. Now, I think it's really important at this stage, you've referenced drug and alcohol services. They're there. So they're there. Residential is an option for somebody that is suffering with drug and alcohol issues. So why cannot the same be extended for somebody that's got a gambling addiction? That I do struggle with. Again, one of the other things that we're looking at is you can get a drug treatment order. So let's say now you're a prolific shoplifter, and you were presenting yourself to custody suites, there'll be somebody there that can put you on a drug treatment order, So again, I know taking into consideration the severity of any of the crimes, but surely there should be something that, I know it's getting considered, but from an HMP probation point of view, a bit more forward thinking. I know there is people out there that are working towards this, and we have had some people in on that pathway, but should that not also be an option?
Yeah, as you know, Cheryl, there's a few guys in our team who obviously went through criminal justice system, and they're big on this, like it's their big passion to try and get this, and they work tirelessly to try and do it, but it's so slow, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we're sitting on the probation boards for Wales, to say that there is this option and to try and move the conversations along. Again, as well, I want to stress, I'm not saying that everybody, because you have to take into consideration if there is victims, and the crime involved. But surely, and again, one of the other things we're finding as well with people that have been through the criminal justice system with gambling harms, it takes months and months and months, if not years sometimes, from the minute they've walked through and been arrested to actually being dealt with by the courts.
Yeah, totally. There's just been a guy in one of the guys in our programme, 3 years from the day he handed himself into the police to getting sentenced. 3 years. That's a long time to then go and do a sentence, especially when you've dealt with the addiction, you've dealt with the underlying issues, you've got diagnosis of, other neurological conditions and neurodiversity and all of that sort of stuff. And then you then got to go and serve some time. And I agree. Sometimes, certain crimes need some sort of custodial sentence. That's all part of the journey. But the fact that none of that's took into consideration, them 3 years, generally isn't. And it's all judge by judge. That's the thing. It's judge by judge. Yeah. We've also seen other people get suspended sentence because a judge is more aware and understands and all that sort of stuff, where some don't. And there's no continuity.
Because if you think about the person you've just been referencing now, I mean, I'm not sure what their sentence was, but they've already done 3 years. They've already done, but they've done 3 years of work, but they've also got 3 years of it. They may as well have been in prison to a degree. And that's, sometimes I think about, when people are out and they're not on remand, so to speak, if they'd been put on remand, the probability was they would have been out now, that time served. Again, I'm not saying everybody needs to be put into prison either, but I think that, 3 years is a long time, isn't it, for everything to come to a decision on, right, we're going to charge you and this is what you're going to get.
Yeah, it's sad. Something else you mentioned there, you slipped it in, Cheryl, and you probably thought I wasn't going to pick it up, but you mentioned the NICE guidelines.
Yeah.
Tell us. So you mentioned the NICE guidelines on gambling, and then you spoke about non-residential treatment, residential treatment not being in the NICE guidelines. Yet there is treatment for drug and alcohol, residential. Why is the NICE guidelines around drugs and alcohol, I presume? Is it in them NICE guidelines or not? Oh, do you not know? But it's part of the pathway, isn't it? It's there. Yeah, it's available.
Yeah.
So why should it not be there? Or why do you think they're saying it shouldn't be there?
So we consulted on the NICE guidelines and we put some, obviously evidence into it around kind of like the pathway and what we were seeing. And I think without getting caught up in the politics and keeping it to fact, they are actually saying there's not a lot of evidence around the efficacy of residential. So I think that's kind of like with drug and alcohol services, they've been going for many, 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 many years, haven't they? When people are coming through sustained recovery. So, and I think that's the bit that we need to get to now. So one of the things that I want to be looking at for my master's is actually the efficacy, what we've seen, what's the recovery rates like, what the outcomes are, to try and get it there as a consideration for people. Because I will always go back to, when you look at the clients that come through Parkland Place, where would they go? Where would they go in whatever is to come, the landscape is to come? What I've always said, my worry is what waiting list would they go on? Because they've got a drug and alcohol problem, so did they go on the drug and alcohol waiting list? They've got mental health problems, they go on the mental health waiting list. They've got a gambling problem, but in Wales we don't have an NHS clinic. So, where would they go? And that's one of my biggest things. That just
isn't a pathway for them, Cheryl. That's the reality, isn't it? That's kind of what we're seeing, isn't it?
Yeah. And that's fact. There isn't an NHS clinic in Wales, not at the moment. There is talks of one coming, but again, you look at the demographics of Wales. I often laugh because people say, yeah, but it's small, Cheryl. It takes about 5 hours to get from north to south. But from a demographic point of view, would you have a walking clinic? And I think the plan is potentially maybe not for it to be walking, for it to be online. But again, what about the ones that want face-to-face? So that, Wales is in a little bit of a different position to England. We've always acknowledged that because England have got the clinics.
Yeah.
But again, they are supported by the third sector and we can't move away from that.
Yeah, definitely. I know you said you didn't want to talk about politics, but the political landscape around the levy. So there's a levy going to be on the gambling industry, which is going to bring X number of millions of pounds into the space, which probably isn't enough. Everyone's getting dead excited about it. The reality is it's causing chaos. Do you think it's enough?
No.
Tell us why not. Tell us why not.
Because if you look at how drug and alcohol people are supported, they get back 400 million. I didn't check my figures, but I know it's a considerable amount of money from the public purse. So, you've got local authority frameworks that put people through rehab for drug and alcohol, detox and rehab. So 100 million, and even that's to be divided up.
It doesn't go very far, does it?
It's insignificant, really. It's insignificant. And if you think of all the money that the gambling industry has taxed, could that not have been proportioned a little bit differently?
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing, isn't it? Like the drug and alcohol's been around for a long time. Where does that money come from for the drug and alcohol? Taxes for central government.
Central government, yeah.
Yeah, yet we require a levy to be put on the gambling industry to bring money into a system to support people that have got a different addiction.
Yeah.
It's all wrong, that, isn't it?
Well, I just think it could have been maybe a little bit. But I think at the time there was so many loud voices around this that the third sector didn't necessarily bang their drum louder to say, oh, hang on a minute, we are doing this, we are delivering this. And like I say in Wales, when you look at Adferiad and also mention in ARA, that's the only option for some people, So we possibly didn't bang our drum loud enough and actually shout some of our successes as providers, really, to say, but actually, is there another way that this could have been done?
Yeah, definitely. As moving on then, so worked in this space now for 4 years. You just mentioned you're doing a master's.
Yeah.
Tell us what you're doing your master's in.
Public health.
Public health. Is there any reason you chose public health?
I think I did it because obviously working within drug and alcohol and the gambling space now, they're all public health issues. And, I just want to be able to provide something for my dissertation that's going to have some kind of like resonance, really. And why not do it on a full service delivery? Yes, we've already been evaluated, but actually this would be a fuller service evaluation. What is the purpose of it? What do we achieve from it? So that's what I'm doing it on, but currently staying away from that with some of the essays that I am writing so I don't self-plagiarise myself down the line.
And it is a public health problem, isn't it? Addiction in general is a public health problem. Gambling addiction has always been a public health, it's been a public health problem and been on the radar for a long time, but we're only now seeing money come into that space. But it's like we said before, it's not a central government funded thing.
Well, if you think about as well, so if it's the proportion for treatment, that still has to then go to the devolved. So the devolved nations, so Wales will get a proportion and Scotland will get a proportion. So again, it and they're devolved, so they'll be done decided a little bit differently potentially. But also then we've also got NHSC being disbanded. So
yeah, lots of challenges lie ahead in the space. But how do you think that's going to impact the person that needs help?
Well, for us, it's business as usual. They don't need to know the challenges that are facing them. They just need to know that there's money available at the moment and that, we will continue to put people through treatment as we move towards, because at the moment, Adferiad are only funded until end of March 2026. But we need to start we've started with the conversations, but what does it look like? We always have an exit strategy. So, do we have to start implementing an exit strategy? But again, the difficult conversations of phoning people up and saying, this pathway no longer exists, so this is now your alternative. That does does worry me slightly, but you have to put faith that stuff is going on in the background, and then we'll get the conversations to say, well, this is actually what's happening.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes it's a bit narrow-minded, isn't it, in terms of like, how much is riding on this? This is people's lives at the end of the day, isn't it? Like, it's not about the money, it's not about the commission, and it's not about who's got control, it's not about any of that stuff. It's about, how do we help people?
Well, when you're doing assessments on people that, have had attempts on their life, serious attempts on their life, who've then come through the pathway, who've then gone on to have sustainable recovery or in jobs and things, who's to say that it works? Obviously, it doesn't always work, but these are people's lives. And like I say, if we're going to be in the NICE guidelines don't reference residential, then obviously we have to look at where does that leave us beyond March 2026. But, luckily for Adveriad, we do have an arm of, like a counselling arm, therapeutic services. So it could mean that we, go about upskilling, that kind of service to be able to continue the work that we do, but it would be community-based.
Yeah. The NICE guidelines don't mention residential. We've said it a few times now. NICE guidelines don't mention much. That's the reality, Cheryl, isn't it? The NICE guidelines have gone down a very one-dimensional treatment plan or pathway. But actually, as we know, everybody recovers in their own way.
Absolutely.
So we need multiple pathways to recovery. And if we haven't got multiple pathways to recovery, we're just going to have this revolving door.
It's not one size fits all, is it?
Well, it's not, is it? And as you've said, you've got people who've got gambling, underlying health conditions, ketamine, opioids, pain relief, prescribed medication, cocaine, all of them are completely different. And somebody needs a pathway that's going to help that person, wherever they find themselves, person-centered way to help them move forward in life. And the NICE guidelines are a great guide, very NHS-driven. Let's not beat about the bush here. They're not very holistic, I don't think, in terms of community-based recovery. And I think that's the biggest thing that I've seen, the shift in the drug and alcohol space since Dame Carol Black's report came out, was recovery-based services, not treatment-based, not clinical-based, recovery-based. And yet we don't even mention, I think recovery's mentioned maybe 9 times in the NICE guidelines. It's not even part of the plan. Like, how narrow-minded is that? Like, for me, it's just, it's incredible.
And, you look at somebody that's in treatment. For us, Parkland Place is a bubble, isn't it? But the recovery starts when they step outside, and they've got to have everything around them to have sustainable recovery outside. We can teach them what we can teach them. They can take it all on board, but they have to put the work in. Like you say, the recovery, it starts.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, obviously the recovery journey starts the minute they walk into detox.
Help.
Yeah. But equally, the harder work, I believe, starts the minute you step outside. And
the minute you step outside and you haven't got the coping strategy, the drink, the drug, the gambling, you haven't got, the runaway, the way to run away or anywhere to run away to, and you've got to sit with them feelings, them emotions, them painful situations. You've then got to handle all your debt. You've got to put your finances in order. You've got to build relationships. You've got to become that's hard work. Yeah. That is hard work.
I mean, we do try and cover a lot of that because obviously we have to look at what's more troubling, not troubling, but obviously if you've got a myriad of debt, but you've also got some difficult conversations to be having with partners and friends, we do try and accommodate that whilst they're in, because, again, the other thing that I'm very, very mindful of, and it's been coming more and more apparent, is we put somebody into treatment and then the affected other or others are kind of like left. And no matter how many conversations you have, like, with the affected other and signpost them, sometimes they're under the impression that the person's come in. Parkland is a beautiful place, set in some wonderful grounds, gardeners, chefs, that they're on a holiday or a retreat or and it's maybe what we're looking at now is some kind of pack to put together to go with the affected other. So actually this is what they're doing while they're in with us. Because all of a sudden, this person's gone into treatment, they need help, but they've left a destitution at home. And then it's like, well, we need to do more to support, I think, the affected other and have them difficult conversations before, you go back out into the community, because if you don't have
and
them,
met with resentment and suffer and chaos.
Yeah, because if you don't have them, what's the chances of relapse?
Yeah, totally. How important is your support and family and for people who are coming back home?
I think it's integral. And, you know, some of the learning curves that we've learned is that we don't always bring the family member along with the journey, you know, and that's something, like I say, we are looking at, you know, with family pack and things. And again, of course, we also have to take into consideration that they might be the reason why, you know, so it is a balancing act. You know, if somebody's come into you and they treat, I don't want my family member to know because of A, B, C, and D, does put you in a little bit of a difficult space, but obviously for confidentiality, you have to keep that in mind. But I think to have family support, and it's very easy, isn't it, that they go, right, that's it, I've had enough, you know, off you go, kind of thing. And then they just felt they're left and abandoned. But actually, trying to speak to the family member, going, right, okay, how can we support you to be in a better place to be able to support them after they've left?
Yeah, there's that like whole family approach, I think, is really important. But then there's also what's happened to that affected other through somebody else's addiction. They've lost their self-worth, they've lost their confidence, they've lost trust, do you know what I mean? There's so much harm. They've suffered so much harm personally. How are we even going to help and support them become and deal with their shit? Not the gamblers. I think sometimes we want to support the affected other to support the gambler, but can we just support the affected other as a person?
Yeah.
And if they become a better person, they then support the gambler anyway.
Yeah. And I think that's the bit that we need to separate, don't we? You know, we've had people before now, the affected other has only ever known that the problem when the police have knocked the door. You know, there was one case where they were both arrested because the police were convinced that the affected other should have known. Surely you knew that they were, you know, because you've had a lavish lifestyle. It's not the case. You know, when somebody's stolen from an employer or whatever, it's not because they've got a lavish lifestyle and they're going on holidays to the Maldives. It's because, you know, they're trying to fund, feeding the addiction. So how do you support somebody in that? You know, and to be honest with you, you need to have two separate. So, you know, if your husband and wife are, one's in the rehab and one's outside, they absolutely have to be separate, because they need a safe space to be able to say, you know, this has absolutely crushed me. The person in rehab is already feeling guilt and shame. They don't need to then be told, oh, this has just been disclosed to me, you've crushed a person. Let's try and separate the two so that they can both heal separately to be able to support each other moving forward. Yeah,
definitely. Blue sky thinking. But we've got to have it, haven't we? We've got to have that target, that goal. We've got to create a system that is very much family orientated in some cases to help the development and growth of both individuals, but then a collective as well.
Yeah, and it's about learning to let go, isn't it? Because one of the things that we try and say when we've got family members coming in is you will know what the person looks like in active addiction, be it drug and alcohol. I mean, you can tell. The problem is what we found, and one of the biggest learning curves for me, and I remember get asked this question, is what's the biggest thing you've learned about gambling addiction? And I was like, right, okay, if I had £1 million as a gambler and you had £1 million as an alcoholic, you'd pass out before you spent that £1 million. Or you'd be dead because of cirrhosis, and it would show itself, wouldn't it, in other ways.
Much more prolonged.
But a gambler can hide it, but that money can just go in, you know, so many spins and things like that. So that's one of the biggest things that I've learned. But it's trying to teach the family member, going back on track, is so you know that person, you know the signs, you know what you're looking for. So look for them signs rather than, have you been down the pub? Have you been in the slot machines? Have you been to the, you know, because
all of that's driven by the pain, isn't it?
Yes.
So if we can help them manage their pain and discomfort, then hopefully we can help them find new coping strategies and ways to deal with it. Yeah, I love it. Something we ask every guest, and we're going to finish on this, Cheryl, is what 3 things do you think should be in somebody's recovery toolkit?
Well, you have to start with honesty for me, you know, because if there's no honesty, there's no recovery. You know, if you're always going to hold back on something, then, like I say, you're not going to get a sustained recovery, I don't feel. So we try and teach people honesty. We try and teach people resilience, and we just try and self-awareness, know what your triggers are.
That's a huge thing, isn't it? Self-awareness, without it, you're fucked. That honestly, you are. Without doing some work on yourself and understanding. And when we talk about self-awareness, I assume, by the way, so tell us if I'm wrong, but I assume you're talking about understanding what's normal for you. You know, so some people say, oh, he gets really angry all the time. And I'll say, does he normally get, yeah, he normally gets angry. He normally, like, oh, well, that might be different. That might not, if he's not, when he goes and be dead quiet and he isolates and he's on his own and he's not getting angry, then you might want to start worrying.
Yeah.
You know, just like the placid person, when they get angry, it might be actually a sign that there's something wrong. So two completely different people could present in completely different ways. So self-awareness is knowing what's normal for me and then knowing when I feel a bit discomfort, I feel a bit of pain, I feel triggered, I feel emotional, knowing what all them things are so that I can manage my life better.
Absolutely. But also as well, what about honest conversations? You've all been, you know, people who've been through this journey now, they have a better understanding of themselves. Obviously, you know, supporting the affected other a little bit more. For them conversations to be a little bit easier now than, you know, if they feel triggered or if they feel that they're going to pick up or they're going to go into just have that conversation. And what we say with our aftercare and our welfare calls is, just pick up the phone. We could be the difference.
Yeah, how important, so important, isn't it? People, shame and stigma though, isn't it? Shame and stigma stop people asking for help. You know, when I left treatment, my therapist said, I never want a phone call off you to hear that you're 6 months, 1 year, 6 years sober. I want a phone call off you when your head's fallen off.
Yeah. And this is what I say to them, you know, there's no judgment. And, you know, we're not going to sit there and go, oh, God, you know, we're literally going to go, let's walk through that. But if you even feeling like that, I say to them, just pick up the phone. There's no burden there. Yeah. There's no, you know, there doesn't have to be the shame and stigma. You've not let anybody down. It's just having them conversations, because in the rehab, we can look at life's eventualities, okay, grief and all that kind of thing. But we might not get something quite right for yourself, which has happened while you've been outside. So it's kind of like, do you know what? I need to pick up the phone and talk through this.
Yeah. Yeah, so important, so important. Can't encourage that enough for people. And obviously we at Epic Restart work with people when they've come out of Parkland to rebuild their life again. But there's still times where we go, actually, pick up the phone and ring them. Yeah. You know, and like we said, no, there's no wrong door. There's no you're finished. You can't speak to them ever again because you moved on. It's like, it's not like that, is it? It's got to go backwards and forwards, and it's about learning who you are. Yeah. Dealing with the shit. Yeah. And overcoming it.
And, you know, I met somebody last week in a conference who's done Parkland and done Epic and have doing fantastically well. So it works. It works, but a lot of the work has to be done by yourself.
Yeah, totally. Cheryl, I'm going to end it there. I just want to thank you so much for coming all the way from Wales to Newcastle to record a podcast. But it's been great to have you on. I think the pathway is just so important. So if somebody does want help or feels like you could be the pathway for them, how would they get in touch?
So they can either go on the Parkland Place website, they can phone 01492 203 421, or they can equally send me an email, cheryl.williams@veriad.org, and we will pick it up straight away.
Brilliant. I'll put them links and phone number and stuff in there in the show notes and stuff as well. So thank you very much, Cheryl. It's been a pleasure to have you here. And yeah, let's see what happens over the next 6 months.
You're welcome.
Thanks for listening to the Recovery Toolkit Podcast. If you took something positive from it, then why not subscribe? If you or somebody you know has been suffering gambling-related harm, why not head over to our website where you can join our community? The link is in the show notes.